You are with the University of Karate, and we've gathered to study the principles, theories, science, the disciplines that come together to study and also reveal the martial arts. Our topic today is dealing with Sanchin and breathing, the breathing techniques that are found in and that shape the development of Sanchin, the kata that is seen throughout Okinawan styles, that is prevalent in southern Chinese styles, especially Fukian-based shot styles. And we want to study about this breathing pattern and breathing technique found in Sanchin. As a preparatory note before Sensei Mike Biddle comes in to share his understanding and his training and teaching concerning this, we want to make a very clear differentiation between what generally people think of when they think of Sanchin, because the majority of Okinawan styles have a Sanchin kata and they practice Sanchin. I want to say, without trying to exalt Uechi-Ryu or make competition, that there is a difference between the Uechi-Ryu demonstration and understanding of Sanchin and its breathing and virtually every other style, both Okinawan and Japanese, that do Sanchin. And the difference is this. When you look at Sanchin in most all of your Okinawan styles, except for Uechi-Ryu, it is largely an exercise. When I say exercise, it is a exercise. It's to exercise the muscles and exercise the breath. Now, yes, you're Sanchin stepping. Yes, you're doing dynamic tension. But it is a exercise based upon Sanchin, as opposed to what we see in Uechi-Ryu, which is an actual kata, which is having a breathing pattern, a breath pattern. And you'll see that the breathing pattern and breath work in Sanchin is very different in Uechi-Ryu than other styles. You'll see other styles where they'll have truly an exercise, where they're using maximum dynamic tension and also maximum inhalation and exhalation of the breath. As a matter of fact, sometimes the mouth will be open as they breathe out and breathe in. That is very, very different from what you see in Uechi-Ryu. And there's a reason why. We want to discuss today why there's a difference in the breathing, what that breathing pattern is, and talk about some of the things, as Sensei Biddle will say, under the hood is happening, and also what is the purpose of this breathing from a number of different aspects. We'll let Sensei Biddle jump in and explain that even now.
Okay. Yeah, the Sanchin breathing. I know I'm going to say things that are going to you probably never heard or surprise you, but let's just say something about Sanchin real quick. And this is the thing that, and I mentioned this before, where we all think Sanchin is the beginner's kata. It's not the beginner's kata. It's the beginning kata, but it's also the end kata. And my instructor used to always talk about Sanchin, Seisan, Sansei-Ryu, and then he talked about the circle of kata, and everything leads back to Sanchin. And it took me a long time to understand the concept of what he meant there when I finally managed to make that circle. So now Sanchin is the most important thing that I know, because it has all those things like John was talking about. So the component of that having said, let's talk about the breathing. So Sanchin breathing is different than some of the other Okinawan styles and maybe even Chinese styles. And I'm not saying any of them are wrong, but I'm going to give you the interpretation or the understanding of the Sanchin breathing and how it works within our style. But I can't do that without first talking about the proper way to breathe. And we mentioned this in another video, but I want to briefly mention it again. Your lungs are bell-shaped. The biggest part of the lung is at the bottom. If you take a deep breath and you expand your chest, you're breathing incorrectly. That's how I check. I'll say, take a deep breath, and they lift their chest. I'm saying, okay, I'm sorry, you're breathing wrong. Your diaphragm and your stomach should push out. Yeah, it's not as sexy. But you and singers and musicians understand how to push the air down in the lower part of the lungs. 2/3 of your lung is in the below part. So if you're chest breathing and you're breathing in the upper third, you're missing out on 66% of the oxygen capability that your body can generate. And you want to talk about VO2 max and all these things that we look at in research now, Sanchin will create VO2 max. So how is that done? Well, when you breathe, you should force the air down. When you breathe in through the nose, you push the air down, and then when you exhale, your stomach will push the air out slightly. So that's the breathing pattern, but you've got to practice that separately from Sanchin. I mean, you don't have to, but I would do it separately because you want that to become your living breathing pattern. That's how you want to learn just to breathe. So Sanchin breathing. Well, first thing, you always hear the hiss, the st, st. What's causing that? That is the compression of the tongue against the roof of the mouth. So when you make that st sound, I put the tongue against the roof of my mouth and I force that exhalation out. Why? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. It engages your lower core. It engages your lower abdomen. Since you push the air down, that's where the air should be. Because you've started Sanchin and you've put the air down there, and now you're going st, st. And that tension, that engagement of your lower core is sitting right over and very near what's called the vagus nerve. That vagus nerve is that major nerve that sends the sinus signals throughout your body. So you've activated that bad boy, and that has a lot of significance, which I'm not going to go into now. But I just want to say that. Now, we've also talked about how the body alignment is important. The same thing: hips tucked, shoulders square, head pulled back, the back in alignment. That also opens the spine and aligns that vagus nerve. It also opens the capacity of your lungs to breathe correctly. If you're bent over, humped over, or pushed too far back, your lungs are not in the ideal position to breathe. For example, like just to give you an absurd example, when they hung in the Roman days, when they hung people on the cross, their arms stretched wide, they couldn't breathe. They died of oxygen deprivation. That was what killed them. Because you can't breathe. Because that weight starts to pull and constrict all those areas, and the lungs don't work, and you constrict. You die by constriction. So proper alignment so that's just an absurd example of what would happen if you do it badly. If you do it badly enough, then you can cause yourself bigger problems. So learn to keep your Sanchin alignment. So that is compressing the air in the lower part of the air and creating that alignment of the body and the vagus nerve impact. Now, where does that occur in the strikes? And there's many ways that you see this. Originally, when I first learned to do it, it was taught at the end of the movement, so I punched, and then as I pulled my elbows back into Sanchin position, that was where was the st. It was pull, st. So it was all the returning motions that the exhalation was done. Later on, as I moved through more advanced levels, my instructor told me now, and I'd have to think about why. There's a reason for it. I haven't spent much time thinking about that, but maybe I'll come back with the answer on that when I figure it out. But later on, I learned that the breath happened at the end of the strike, at the extension point. And so as the punch ends, it's st. And then the pullback is a very, very subtle inhalation. And that's the third part I'm going to cover, but not yet. That at the end of the strike activates the muscles, compresses that lower part of the abdomen, engages the vagus nerve, and sends that energy through the arm and through the muscles into the impact. So the timing of it's very critical. And if you notice, boxers do this. They don't use our same thing, but they exhale. Some method of it. Segue. Pilots will grunt breathe to keep themselves from passing out under G pressure. So breathing is for them, they won't make it. Yeah. So you'll hear them, and it sounds like stupid, but what they're doing is they're keeping those pathways open. So because things are happening in their, with the G-force and the compression that they're experiencing, their brain will shut down and they'll black out. So they're keeping the oxygen flowing. Well, we really want to kind of do the same thing in Sanchin. Well, we don't do the grunt thing, but you could if you wanted to. But the tongue at the roof of the mouth forces a compression, and that backfeeds the system. So I talked about how the lungs are shaped, how to properly breathe. I talked about where the breathing should occur. The third thing is the balance of breathing throughout the Sanchin. Most people, when they're doing Sanchin and they're doing to the and they finish their kata and there's a big exhale. That means they've over-inhaled. What you'd like to see at the end of the form is just stop and resume normal breathing. So what you have to do is you have to learn to modulate this, and this took me a while to do, is to, I would always have too much air at the end, and I would have to exhale it out, which is not a bad thing, but you don't want to have too much, but if you have enough, if you take a blow, someone hits you in the stomach, then you're going to be able to absorb it better. But you'd ideally rather keep that pressure balance consistent. That's more effective to aligning the system, right? So as you're going through the form, what you want to make sure you do is as you exhale, it's a very light, equal inhale through the nose. Just a little, and I don't know if you can hear that or not, but it doesn't really matter. I'm just taking a little sharp breath in my nose. Very small, smaller than you think. Now, if you're underdoing it, in the end you're going, then you didn't inhale enough. So there's two ways that can happen. So you ideally want to learn to keep that balance of pressure. And I use that word very precisely with intent, that you want that the system pressurized. If you think of hydraulics, your brakes, you don't want bubbles of oxygen in your brakes. They won't work. That system has to be properly pressurized. That's when people don't do it anymore, but we used to have to bleed the brakes to get that brake fluid out and get the oxygen out. And then quick, shut it off so they get here. That way they don't get squishy. So you don't want your body squishy. So you want to keep that system pressurized. And that then regulates your ability to take an impact. So if somebody does manage to strike you in the chest or the stomach or the solar plexus, you're not going to be gasping for breath. That's why I don't particularly care for, and I understand the reason for it. I'm not arguing about that. The long exhalation where, and the punch. I really don't like to teach that, because if you're doing that and then you're doing that when you're punching, then you're exhaling air. And the easiest way to lose your breath, someone hits you in the solar plexus and knocks the wind out of you, is to be exhaling. You don't want to be exhaling. So that's why at the end of our strike, it's and it's a short, quick. Why? Because we don't want to be vulnerable in that. That's the terrific thing when you examine Sanchin, is it's really the simplest system to protect all the vulnerabilities and to enhance all the specific systems that you want to be able to use. And breathing is the most important thing that you can be doing, because that's what fuels the whole body, oxygenates it, removes lactic acid, keeps all the pieces moving in the right way. And if you're not breathing correctly, then you're operating below optimal efficiency.
Well, there's so much that we can even just examine in what we just looked at with the idea of breathing. For those that are of styles, Uechi-Ryu, Shido-Ryu, whatever it may be, that practice Sanchin, what is your experience in your understanding and exercise in Sanchin? And what is your understanding of the Uechi method that we see in the videos that we show, as well as our conversation today? Put it down in the comments below. Let's have a conversation about this, and also continue to enter into more and more understanding of the various different disciplines, whether it be disciplines of breathing, developing the joints, developing the tendons, developing the muscles, the organs, balance, all the various different disciplines that are put together, even stretching, that make up the martial arts. We want to discuss this. You are with the University of Karate. We appreciate you being with us. Please like and subscribe this video, and we'll see you again next time.